Hi, my name is Kellen Kirkbride, and I am presenting my social work conference presentation on my PTSD support treatment group. So, a summary of Part A and B assignments. So, my population background, I'm targeting the first responders who responded to the August 8th wildfire in Maui, Hawaii. This was marked the deadliest wildfire in U.S. history, and first responders on the island of Maui were stretched to their limits. Many worked over 36 hours straight with no outside support. Just to give an idea of what this looked like, there were 12 dispatchers who screened over 4,500 calls on August 8th. Um, my husband and I were actually living on Maui at this time, and he was in the Coast Guard and was one of the first responders who responded that evening. Um, and his quote is that since every member of the response team was utilized from all agencies on the island, there was no one who was eligible to complete a debrief or post incident crisis care. And also, there was just no space for it because they were just constantly working. Okay, so the treatment group proposed for this population, like I mentioned, is a specialty group focusing on PTSD symptoms in first responders. The overall purpose of this treatment group is to address PTSD symptoms in the first responders related to the August 8th wildfires in Maui. This group will allow members to have an active role in not only receiving the help that they need, but getting additional psychological reward by offering help to their peers as well, which is why I think that the group setting is so appropriate for the population of first responders. So, the intervention proposed is based off of the evidence based practice of cognitive processing therapy, or CPT. The group will meet for 90-minute sessions bi-weekly for 6 weeks to include 12 total sessions. The 5 psychoeducation modules of CPT will be included, and these will be safety, trust, power and control, esteem, and intimacy. So, the rationale for the need within this community. So, first responders are already a community at risk for developing PTSD following the response of traumatic events, especially if early interventions are not offered. Post response, statistics show that 1 of 3 first responders will develop PTSD symptoms in the absence of mental health support. So, on a macro level, there's already a social stigma for this population when seeking mental health services. And then on a meso level, no, there were no available critical incident stress management or SISM training or response post incident. And then on a micro level, there are already very limited mental health resources available on Maui. And there's also very little data at this time to show what macro level support was accessible. But as a resident of Maui at the time, it was clear that the federal and state support came too late. So the post incident report released by Maui County showed that the state of Hawaii offered only 77 personnel on the ground in the days following the fire, and federal support offered 450 plus personnel to support. But this assistance came weeks after the incident when the majority of that critical response had already been completed. So the day of response and the early day recovery, that most critical response time was completed by the first responders who were residents of Maui. So, the evidence based relevance to social work interventions, like I mentioned, the evidence based practice that was selected for this group was CPT. And this helps to restructure and challenge unproductive beliefs related to trauma. And CPT has been shown effective in reducing PTSD and depression symptoms in active duty military and first responders. Group CPT decreased PTSD symptom scale scores by 4.7 points on average. And this CPT will include psychoeducation, rumination of the traumatic event, and cognitive restructuring of beliefs about the event and trauma associated. So I wanted to show just a little uh, snippet of what the agenda will look like for the 12 sessions. Um, so this is just what each session will entail. So the group evaluation, the PTSD symptom scale will be, or PSSI, will be administered to all participants prior to the start of the group to determine eligibility. And then the PTSD checklist, or PCLS, will be administered before starting group, prior to each group session, and after completion of the group. And that will be the same for the Beck Depression Inventory, or the BDI too. And to ensure longevity of the PTSD symptom management, both the PCLS and the BDI-2 will be given at 2 weeks, 6 months, and 12 months post completion of the treatment group. Community collaboration. So, community enhancement, there are currently no social work interventions offered in this population on Maui. Cognitive intervention via CPT, specialized PTSD support group, will create an even stronger community bond among the first responder agencies, which can create a space for post traumatic growth and psychoeducation for this population who really is vital to the health of the community. Um, Sadly, first responders were criticized for their response by the community, which created even more division. So, what the first responders of Maui need, they need community support for their valiant effort and understanding for the challenges that they faced that evening. They need space for internal and group processing to promote post traumatic growth and cognitive restructuring, and a plan for future post incident response to be implemented into every first responder agency so that we don't have this kind of thing happening again. Like I mentioned, there was misrepresentation from the media, which created questions about the first responders' efforts. I think it would be really helpful to have a debrief with the first responders and members of the community. It's not common knowledge how thin these first responder agencies on Maui were stretched, and it was portrayed that there was more outside help than there really was. Um, so I do think that after a successful completion of the group, that first responders being able to come together with the community and allow the community to hear how hard they fought and what they experienced in the immediate aftermath of the fires and recovery efforts could heal a lot of that hurt that still exists in the community today, even more than a year later. And then here are my references used throughout the slides. Thank you.